So, welcome to the RecWired podcast. I'm delighted to have a guest today who's put me on his podcast before, so it feels a bit weird going around the other way. But we've got Andrew Sillitoe, who is, for those who don't know, been living under a rock for 15 years, a leadership coach, an ex-hockey international, and as I affectionately call it, the man who did for hockey what Cool Runnings did for bobsleigh. So good to catch up again, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well, Andy. It's great to be here with you. Looking forward to the conversation.
So for those who don't know you, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, I gave you the cleft notes there with the introduction, but who are you and what you do?
So I'm a business psychologist, former international athlete and coach. Although technically I'm still an international athlete, albeit vets, but okay. Still rolling around on the skates. And I guess the best way to describe what I do is a leadership coach. We focus on helping recruitment businesses, leaders in recruitment, become more influential, inspirational, and ultimately build teams that win using some principles, straight talking, plain English approach, which uses principles or techniques from elite sports and real world recruitment. So it's not just, there's a lot of noise about the sports parallels, I find, but I hope that the thing that we get the right stuff, the stuff that matters, that works.
So what's really interesting for me is normally when I'm on these podcasts, I'm speaking to people and it's quite abstract. Actually, I've worked with you and you've coached me, which is, so it's really interesting. So when I'm hearing the stories, sort of get the recall of it. And one of the things I always found fascinating was to have you come in and work with me and my teams, either existing teams or teams I've just put together. So, I've experienced some of these moments.
Yeah. And actually, I remember the workshop we did together with your team. And I think it was probably one of the first times I'd used the Get Your House in Order framework with a team. If not, I think it was the first time I'd done it, and I still use it today. And I just remember the group that we had, and it was in that quite modern office where it was.
Yeah, it was a great Portland Street in the boardroom, and I know exactly what you're going to say. It was that moment where the team are walking towards their.
That was one of the activities.
Walking towards their goal, and they stopped, or one of them stopped, and it's like it was just a really amazing moment. And Lord knows what anyone looking in through the glass would have thought about it or said about it. But I really did remember that.
It's a powerful exercise, actually. That's a good one.
So, as well as doing this, you've also written books, many books. Certainly managing.
I'm on my third, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're a man of many talents.
Jack of all trades, master of none. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're a man of many talents. So I think reading your books has been super interesting, and I think you're probably one of the first people I knew that ever wrote a book. Actually, everyone does it now. I get it, but
I know it's the business card, isn't it? These days, everyone's at it. But yeah, I think everyone's got a book in them, as they say.
I think writing a book is like doing a long run, signing up for a marathon or something. You've got to have that level of commitment to doing it, and I think putting your trainers on is the hardest thing to do. Just starting that. But if anyone's thinking of writing a book, what would your advice be?
Just start writing, and not think about the structure. Well, you kind of want a bit of a structure. So typically when I write a book, I come up with whether there's some sort of IP I'm trying to share or key principles. And then what I look at is how that flows. And then what are the stories that I can attach to each of those to bring that to life? So for example, the first book was Managing the Mist. And that book for me was like just speaking with my fingers. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed writing it. It was really a story about me playing hockey and growing up playing street hockey as a kid and then going to Florida and then playing with the British team and living in Canada. And it was just a really nice way to kind of consolidate all my thoughts, if you like, but do it in a way which was generating some practical tools and techniques for the reader, if that makes sense.
So what we're going to talk about today, though, is your current book that you're writing, and I've been lucky enough to have read the first draft, and it's impressive. It really, really is impressive. But you talk about player coach.
Yeah, so I guess in some ways, Managing the Mist could have been this book when I look back, and that's, in hindsight, it's always a great thing, isn't it? You know, player coach for us, or for me, is, and the business is where we niche our efforts. So it's a specific role, as you know, whether you call it a manager consultant, a billing manager, that person who is being identified as a top performer, not always for the right reasons, but they're usually a high contributor who's then been given 2 to 3, maybe 5 people, or one person, and scaling, and they've got that challenge of managing both roles, just like it says, the player coach. But also, it's not just senior consultants. If you think back to the S3 days, that was how the business ultimately scaled. Whether it was doing it intentionally or not, or from a strategic perspective, it seemed to be more sort of organic. Whereas what I'm proposing is, this is a strategic model. You know, this is something you need to consult on and do properly, because you can put the wrong people in that role, and it can be like a pendulum. You know, it can swing either towards opening up your business and you scaling very fast because you've got the right people in that role, or it can be really damaging and create a very toxic culture. And you know, I've seen it so many times over the last 10 years where businesses have they get to 12, then you get to 25. They might break that. If they do break that, they get to the 50, and then literally overnight they're at 12 again. Literally, I mean, I don't know if you would have seen it, but that retention issue that happens, and for me, it's always because of that middle management role. The person hasn't got the tools, the skills. So I see it as a real problem, but it's a massive opportunity for businesses that are looking to grow. So for me, it's not just about hiring that or that top performer. In fact, I know you put a post out the other day about Ronaldo, you know, and this debate, would Ronaldo make a good billing manager? We call it in the book, I call them a maverick. You know, that these people that they've got a magic about them. No one really knows how they're doing it. You know, you see these consultants that they're just pulling deals out of a hat. Like, how do you do it? So the rookie on the team's like, how are they doing it? And it's frustrating. So they're not necessarily the best people to be coaches, mentors, training, because they don't really know how they're doing it. And secondly, they're not really that interested a lot of the time. So it's finding the right people to go into that role, and it's a really important decision to make. And I think some companies do it just by luck. They just got the right person. Some companies do it and they put the wrong person in there. And some companies do it and they do it really well because they put the right person with the right skill set, mentality, attitude, and then it can really make a difference to the business in a positive way.
I can really relate to that. I mean, my first stint at management, you know, I was a good solid biller. I think it was top 10 in S3 a couple of years running, which, you know, and people put a team around me, train these people up, do that. And, you know, I was okay for a while. And then, you know, I wasn't. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, you couldn't believe how you could get people up and billing and they're making all this money and they still want to leave. And the reason they wanted to leave was I wasn't a particularly good manager. And I think I was quite lucky at the time. I got moved away into, you know, go and do something else, which didn't involve much human contact, but had a lot of time to reflect on how I'd been as a manager, how I'd treated people. And I was able to actually observe some really good managers around how they did it and how they avoided, you know, the mistakes I made. I don't think everyone gets that chance. You know, I think a lot of people then get completely burnt by it and they're either never allowed to do it again or they're fearful of it. And I think it's very much you know, I was lucky that I got a second chance to do it. And you know, you've worked with me. I don't think I'm a natural leader or natural manager. I really, really had to work on it. Really had to be conscious about it.
Well, I think there are skill sets, strengths, and particularly my observation of working with you, and it goes back to the Get Your House in Order framework. You know, there's a left side to that house, which is about results and process. And I would definitely put you there. And actually, managers, you need to have that, right? You need to be able to have that operational focus. You need to be able to hold people accountable. You need to be able to be very clear about, okay, where are we going with this? The other side is the emotion and the engagement. You know, how do I win the hearts and minds at the same time? And that's the biggest challenge, because we also see leaders who are really good at winning hearts and minds, emotionally connecting with people, empathizing. They just have a natural sort of desire for that, but they don't necessarily get the results, right? And at the end of the day, whether you're a sports team or a sales team, that's what we're measured by. So I think companies that, and I use hockey as an example because that's my game, or you could say football as well. But the difference between the pros and the amateurs, the pros can shoot the puck hard and they can shoot it accurately. They do both at the same time. The amateurs, they usually sacrifice one for the other, right? So they can hit it hard or they can hit it accurately, but they don't do both.
Yeah.
And business is the same, and leadership is the same in some ways. You've got to be able to do performance, drive the numbers, be task focused, but you've also got to be able to do emotional engagement. And if you can do those two, then you really are off to the races as a leader, as a business. And I think that's always a starting point. And I've, as you know, I've worked with hundreds of businesses, and it never amazes, it never, that's the right expression, but ceases to amaze me that the culture of that business is driven by the leader, that the leader's preference. It's like it becomes the DNA of that, but particularly in small to medium-sized business. Obviously, it changes when you get to larger organizations. But I would my observation of S3, operational, organized, focused, everything's very efficient. And then you kind of have a conversation with Russell, you go, oh, okay, that's why it's like that. It was driven in that way. It was that kind of very organized environment. So
very much so. I mean, you had the DNA there of Bill and Simon, and you had Simon, who was the stricter, the business, and Bill was the gregarious, charming. So and as a pair, they work brilliantly together.
Yeah, you get that dynamic, and that's why I always say to business, who's your number two? Who's the person that can be, the yin to yang and have that. If you're really operational focused and task focused, you need someone. And for me, even as a head coach, I'm probably more if I was to do a psychometric, I'm definitely more towards the right side, emotionally engaging, winning hearts and minds. But when I was the head coach, I was actually more focused on the numbers and the, what we could measure as a team. How would we measure the culture even? And then you have an assistant coach who is out there building the friendships, liaising with the players, feeding information up. So I was very aware when I went into that. And it's interesting what you said about kind of that reflection as a manager. I've been a sales manager at Yellow Pages, top performer there. I was a management consultant for a boutique consultancy, and then I joined S3. I was a management consultant there, building the leadership development team there. But the epiphany for me was when I coached the British team, and we made a film about it. Like we had a guy come out and recorded the whole thing, and I shared it with my team at S3, and their feedback was, "Why aren't you like that with us?"
Yeah, who's this guy?
Yeah. Like, it's like, because I was way more on the right side with the team. Like I was, and I think we do that in business sometimes because we don't want to upset people. We don't want to offend anybody. And so we tiptoe around some of these issues. But actually, if it's done in the right way and we keep our feedback objective and it's evidence-based and factual and we keep it as black and white as possible, when we have those tough conversations, which I was really comfortable doing with the British team, when we do it in business, people will talk about those conversations in 10 years. And it's our legacy as leaders. And they're the conversations where it felt like a bit of a kidney blow at the time, but it was a catalyst for change. And we're respected for that more than we're actually respected for being nice. And I think that's something for a lot of leaders to think about when it's done in the right way.
You talk in your book actually around people calling you out as well. I think, there was the guy on the hockey team that, basically was always the argumenter in the room, but you talk about making sure that you listen to those people and just don't rule them out.
Yeah. And in fact, even in that situation, I think I was, what's the word? I was sort of giving him just a chance to speak, what's the word I'm looking for? But anyway,
an audience.
That scenario, pardon?
An audience.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. And just, let's just give him a chance. He was a rookie on the team who had been complaining about one of our tactics. And this particular tactic, we call it in hockey, you call it the forecheck. It's how you put pressure on the opponent so they can't get the puck out their end. And there are different ways of doing that. And this player, a week out from the World Championships, started to say to other players on the team, "This is not going to work. It's not going to work," like that. And we've been practicing it for 6 months. And I was like, "This works." And the captain called me and said that, Rob's been saying this. Rob won't mind me saying it.
Just in case you didn't know it was you, Rob. You do now.
He does now, yeah, when he listens in, if he does. So I phoned him and I said, look, what's going on? Humoring him, I guess is the word, just let's go along. And then he started to share with me. And every time I tell this story, I get goosebumps. I'm getting it now. I was like, oh man, he's right. What he's saying makes total sense. And it was his first year on the British team. And he's a good player, by the way. He played in the US. I hadn't selected him the year before. And he started to share this. And I phoned up Walshy, who's the captain. I said, Walshy, we're changing the system. And he was like, what? And I said, look, it's not a massive change. It's a bit of a hybrid. We'll practice it. And it was a good example of change, actually, because we implemented it. And the first few games, it just didn't work. It just wasn't working. And players were getting frustrated. Typically, the older players were saying, we need to go back to what we've been doing for the last 2 years, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, I can't flip-flop again. We're sticking with this now. And by the time we got to the final, we played Austria. And this is to win the gold medal and get promotion to the A pool, which we'd never done before. We beat Austria. We'd never beaten Austria before. We beat them 5-1. And the hand on heart that they couldn't get out their own end. It was just, by the time we got to the final, it was just working so well. So for me, it was a lesson in don't humor people, actually genuinely listen, be curious, be open-minded as a leader, listen to everybody in your organization from the rookie to the senior, most senior person, because it could really give you some data that you just that you haven't acknowledged. And so it was a real lesson for me.
So when you told me you were doing the player coach and this was the course, and we obviously talked about who this is for, it's really interesting because I see in the groups real sort of two groups of people that really, really need this. First and foremost, you've got the people who have just been made a team leader, or a billing manager, which is the worst job. It honestly is the worst job.
Arguably the toughest job in any industry, let alone recruitment.
It is. So you're still expected to maintain everything you do. And there's a reason you got
and usually 10% more on top of that as well.
100%, because you've got a team now, they can help you. But also as well, you've got to then help these other people up to do that. And actually, you're probably not getting paid super well on that. But you end up, how do you get that balance to make sure you end up doing both those things well? And then I think what is increasingly happened is, what I've seen in the recruitment industry is people who went and started their own businesses when I was still sort of doing recruitment, 10 odd years ago, they tended to be sales managers, sales directors. They had experience of bringing people through, coaching people, and they effectively done their failures, whilst they were getting salary support, L&D, training, HR department to bail them out, all of those type of things. But typically now they'll start their business 3 or 4 years. They've been experienced. Maybe they'll do it with a friend, but they've not had to coach people. They've not had to bring people through. They've not had these knocks. And now they're doing it in a very expensive way. They're doing it on their own tickets.
Off the cuff.
Yeah. So it's sort of helping those founders as well. So I think there's two sort of team leaders stroke billing managers in firms, bigger firms, and founders who've, and it's expensive for them. If they get their first hire wrong, their second hire wrong, it's going to cost them a lot of money, and not just money, time as well. Yeah.
Well, they could get the hire right, but not look after them properly if they don't have the skill set to do it as well. So they lose good people. I think you're right. I think there are, and I think we are seeing more of that. And I think we'll see more of that in the next 10 years. We're going to have a bumpy road, but I think we'll see more recruitment entrepreneurs than ever, because of the tools and systems and the tech, as that's available now to get people up and running so that it can scale to even, whether it's, I think there are 3 levels. I think you've got your business owner, founder, who is a player coach still out in the field, still being productive and doing deals and building a team. You've got your solopreneur who is not necessarily hiring a big team, but maybe outsourcing. And I always say, even when you're outsourcing to freelancers, get them on the journey with you, give them feedback, coach them. You really want them bought into what you're doing. And then, like you say, you've got the middle managers who have been a high contributor and are now given a team. And regardless of what level, there are things that they need to do day to day, which we talk about systemizing your leadership. You want to be able to have a set of things that you do day to day, week to week, month to month, that allow you to then go and focus on your billing. So it's that systemizing. So people hear us say it a lot: bench coach daily, train weekly, mentor monthly. Bench coach daily, train weekly, mentor monthly. Do those three things. Have a clear game plan, and learn, and make sure you learn how to manage your emotions under pressure. But those three areas of bench coach daily, train weekly, mentor monthly, we just keep saying it over and over again. And then you can measure yourself. You can say, right, bench coaching daily. Okay, we're in the game every day. We're not like a sports team practicing once a week. Playing a game once a week, practicing every day. We're in the game every day. That means that my people are in the game every day, and I need to acknowledge them for their good work, and keeping my bench positive, keeping the sales floor positive. So looking for opportunities to give feedback with substance, not just happy, clappy, good job, well done, which we hear a lot of professional sports coaches do on the bench, but when a coach really gives some feedback that tells that player, I noticed what you did and the impact it had on our team has helped us do this. That makes people feel good, and they're more likely to do that activity over and over again. So that develops the growth mindset, etc. So there's that part. And you can ask yourself as a player coach, did I do that today? Did someone go home today hearing something positive from me? Even if it's on a text at the end of the day. Hey, I noticed, I looked at the system, you've done X, Y, and Z. It's helped us get here. That could be the difference, either from someone just having a really good day, deciding whether they're going to hand a notice in the next day or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like just hearing that. And we don't do that. And I speak to coaches or team leaders, and they say, blimey, I haven't done that in a month. So how are your people thinking? I can guarantee if you're not giving them feedback, they're making up their own feedback. And if they're frustrated, if they haven't done a deal yet, and they're putting the hours in, they're turning up early, they're leaving late, they're doing the activity, and they haven't heard you tell them that they're doing a good job, they're going to make up their own version of it. So they need to hear some positivity. Training weekly, as much as I've been on both sides, L&D and as a consultant, sales manager, there's something very special about getting training from your sales manager. Yeah. And supporting what L&D say, but the sales manager brings it to life in a different. That's no disrespect to L&D. I don't, because I think they play a massive role in driving performance and creating a high performance culture. But there's something about those little nuggets that the sales manager, and if you don't create some time each week to have that, you're missing out on a massive opportunity. In fact, we see when team leaders invest in training, like training each week, like just half an hour with their team, getting together to mastermind on a problem, or it could be just a refresher on open questions if it's that, as basic as that. But they just bring it to life, and they will get the biggest ROI on their time from that half an hour than anything else. And we see it because if you do it every week, and it makes sense. If you're a professional sports team, it would make absolute sense when it go, oh, do you know what? When we train, we're a better hockey team, a better sports team. It's funny that, isn't it? It's like, well, why would it be any different in business? Get your team together and train them.
I certainly worked for a great player coach in Scott Fulton. So when I joined Huxley, he was the top biller. And also as well, he did train amazingly. We'd go in, we'd role play, but the best training, we saw him doing it, and literally, and
he's a great example, of someone who's dynamic, results focused, but has that balance of winning. I mean, who do we know in the industry that can win hearts and minds of people, or be as persuasive as Scott Fulton?
And he's fun as well. So if you think of the people that came out of his businesses, and he applied that player coach principle pretty much everywhere he went, and I don't need to name them all now. They'll be listening and they know who they are. So but yeah, it's amazing to see. And I remember actually the difference that certainly made on me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we underestimate the difference. Like the player coaches, on our course, we start by talking about this, that please don't underestimate the power and the influence you have on someone's life. This is not just some kind of transaction. This is not a chore. This is not just someone coming into work who is, difficult or this or that. This is a human being whose life you are making a massive difference to, because you probably spend more time communicating with them than they do with their own family, and I think that is your legacy. And we do an exercise where we ask people to, I haven't done it for a while actually, but we say, who are the last 3 Oscar winners? And write it down. It's like a quiz, male or female Oscar winners. Who are the top richest people in the world? And they go, and then we say, name 3 people in your life that have made a massive difference to you in your life. Everybody gets 3 out of 3 for that, because they're so connected to it. And when you ask that question, okay, look, you don't know who the Oscar winners are. These are the most powerful, influential people, arguably, in the world. The richest people, I'm not sure. Is it Musk? Who is it now? I don't know. But 3 people in your life that have made a difference. What if someone wrote your name on that quiz in 10 years' time? What would it take in your leadership to show up and be like that, so that they write your name down? And then they realize that this is more than just a management role.
I'd love to know how you'd coach Elon Musk. Where do you start with that, Andrew?
I wouldn't know where to start. Yeah, that would be an interesting one.
But one thinks he's uncoachable.
I think he is uncoachable, which is probably why he does what he does. You know, why he puts himself in that position to be able to do the things and make the decisions, life choices he does.
So we were talking Ronaldo on LinkedIn as well. So he's someone who does a team sport, plays in a team, but is very much an individual. You talk about him as, I think you described him as a maverick. So does he have it in him? Could he be a manager? Could he be a player coach?
As it stands, my opinion is no. I don't think he's that. Would he change? I think that Ronaldo would have an expectation that you must think like me. You must train as hard as me. You need to look like me. Look, there's so much ego there. And of course, he does wonderful things as well, outside of the sport. I think we need to acknowledge that. And I think he is genuinely a good human being. But I think that often he's played for himself, which has actually enabled him to play well. It works for a Usain Bolt, because all he's got to do is run for himself as fast as he can. And that kind of ego, that idea works well. I think in a team sport, it's more challenging. I was always wondering where Wayne Rooney would go, but there's no real ego with Wayne Rooney. I wouldn't say they're the same player, but I always wondered, could he teach? Could he coach? And I think he's showing that actually he did have some sort of transformation. He was someone that could look back on his career and say, if only I could have done this differently and been like this. And I don't know if Ronaldo is kind of in that place of reflection, like you described earlier. The wounds and the things you do as a manager, and you're able to get away from that role for a bit, reflect, and go, I can put this right as a manager by having a very different thought process. And I think that's where Rooney went. I don't see Ronaldo doing that.
I think the first part of that is acknowledging where you're weak, and then you either have the opportunity to train on that or double down on your strengths and surround yourself with people who supplement from that. But then
Absolutely.
you've got to be prepared to use those people. And I think back in my career, I probably got so much further because I was able to hire people who effectively covered up for my weaknesses and was so much better in that area for me. But I guess that's, the leader, the manager, the player coach has to be comfortable to almost cede that control as well.
Absolutely. You've got to be really strong in knowing you've got to have a high level of self-awareness, to be able to do that, and to be able to put the ego to one side. One thing we see when we talk about winning mindset, which is something I talked about in Managing the Mist, it was more about mindset, really, that book. And there are 3 things that I've noticed in all top performers. And that is a high level of self-awareness, they're goal-orientated, and they are able to manage their emotions under pressure. Those 3 things seem to connect people. And I think what we often see in coaches is that they look on their career. So you could argue that Wayne Rooney wasn't great at managing his emotions under pressure. he lost it, right? He was aggressive, he would want to hurt people. He talked about this openly in his documentary. But then you look at him maybe as a coach, and he's got that kind of clarity. He's able to compose himself. You don't really see him, not heard any stories of him losing it. So there's a level of transformation, that people can have in their career. But it will always come back to self-awareness, that these are my strengths. This is what I'm really good at. If I just double down on that, and I use it, NHL, the professional hockey league as an example, the best players, they really just know what their superpower is, and they know what they need to do every time they go and have a shift on the ice, that they focus on their strengths. And that they're aware of their weaknesses. And I think in business, if we say, right, I'm this type of leader, this is where I really show up best. I'm really not that. I'm not organized. I'm not process driven. I'm not great at driving the numbers, but I'm really good at this. So my next strategic hire, my MD or my COO, has to have that profile to be able to help me grow this business faster. And I think rather than the danger I think a lot of people made, and I saw a bit of this at S3, and be careful what I say, but I think there was a tendency to hire people like us. And that could it sometimes be, well, it will be detrimental if we keep hiring people like us.
What I always thought was interesting, I always found you very different, because, if we look at, the classic Tetra map, I'd be a strong earth, secondary air, where I think you'd be a water, secondary fire, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
well remembered. That was about 15 years ago.
But I do remember, and that exercise is really important, because I'd look at other people and say, I'd remember the sort of whole, how they should be communicated to, how they sort of fit with the environment. And if I was with, another earth type fire, earth air type, I just knew that they were on the same page as me, and it's fine. Yeah. So, but for me, you talk through those sort of three principles. The other one for me was understanding that weaknesses. And I scored the lowest recorded score at Henley Business School for emotional intelligence. And having done a Hogan profile, and we got a picture of you on the wall at Henley Business School. No, the way they described me was the guy actually said, if you weren't intelligent, you wouldn't have a job. He basically said that, right. you basically... Was that a compliment? Was it? Kind of. Don't think it was, and for me, and there's a whole story, and it could even be, it's definitely one for a beer, but actually knowing that allowed me to realize that as a weakness, as risk, and to some extent change, but also as well, once you know that, I took really bad decisions under pressure. So, and I wasn't able to, and I remember the management coach saying, we can spend 5 years teaching you to make better decisions under pressure, or we can half an hour and you can just chill out. And right. And I say, well, I'll take that course. That sounds more interesting. But, and you're born with it. You're never perfect, but you start to look for trigger signals, work from it, and knowing where you are on that is so super important. So I can really resonate. So you're doing this now, so help is available for people like me that should have gone through this. So you do, tell us a bit about the course. So we have a course for the player coach, which has become more of an online course. I think we found the secret sauce for making online courses work, still keeping them experiential. We actually brought in more coaches to try and replicate what an in-person session would look like, but it's a 5-day course. Okay. It's 2 hours every morning, so UK time, so typically 9 till 11, and we have a different module each day. So there are kind of 3 elements really, but the first element is watch the video content. So loads of video content for people to work through, and that preps them for the 5-day sprint, which is module 1 to 5. So we teach the bench coach daily, train weekly, mentor monthly. We teach them how to manage emotions under pressure. So there's a bit more of that emotional intelligence stuff that comes in, and also how to set the game plan, do real problem solving, and how to, whether you are the founder, get your game plan together, or whether you are a middle manager and need to align yourself with the game plan and be more operational in the way you do it. So we teach that. And then the third element after the 5-day sprint is meet with us every week on the Q&A. And then we work through business challenges, teach new things,
So today, for example, we're talking about presence and gravitas and how to, non-verbal presence and so on. So that's our topic today. So we do that every week because we know that the 5-day sprint gives them the toolkit, but the science tells us that we typically forget 70% of what we learn on a management training course or any course, no matter how good it is or how sticky it is or how experiential it is. So we want to embed it. And that's why we do the weekly Q&A, so that they can come in and refresh their minds on the content and so on, and ask questions, share challenges. So that's how the program works. But because of what, you mentioned earlier about founders wanting these skills and these tools, what we decided to do was run a 3-day program. It's 5 days, but people arrive on the Monday. It's in person. It's in Prague. It's a kind of an experience, really. But 3 days of leadership development with coaching and masterminding in a kind of relaxed way into the evening. Only 12 people on the course. So it's a really good opportunity for founders to come together, get that toolkit, and go back with a game plan and a way to implement it. So we talk about performance, personal leadership, and execution on that. So that's specifically for founders and maybe some very senior business leaders. An MD that's been brought in to the business.
So you're hosting that in March in Prague?
March in Prague, yes. Yeah. So it should be great. I mean, it's a beautiful city, nice place to get away. It's easy to get to, so it's a perfect destination really for it.
So you've been in Prague how long now?
It's coming up for 3 years.
Wow. So you went there pre-COVID, I think, as well. So you're almost
just before 3 months before COVID. Yeah.
What did you know that we didn't about running remote businesses?
Well, I was running a mastermind. I was quite lucky really with that. But I did go out with the idea that we had training all booked through the year, globally. And of course that just got turned off. So the revenue just stopped. I remember saying to my wife, this is going to be tricky. Because we have literally the tap's been turned off because our trainers all set up, doing it. But I had the 4 Keys mastermind, which you probably know about, which is not something we promote. It's more focused on health, well-being, mindset, and that was running already before I went out.
Tired just watching that.
What's that?
You make me look tired watching that. That exercise regime.
Oh yeah, with the 10 daily habits, and So we encourage people to. I mean, the main thing about it is getting your own oxygen mask on first. And actually, it was not only was it good from my perspective, commercially, if you like sounding crude about it, but because it was online, but also the fact that we had this program that really helped a lot of people through COVID, and that worked quite well. And then in October of 2020, I launched the first online program. I didn't want to rush into it. I didn't want to just take the program that we already had and put it online. I just didn't think it would work. It really needed redesigning. Yeah. So we ran that as a pilot, got some feedback, ran it again. And I think we've had about 250 people go through the online program since 2020. So, well, more than that, if you include some of our corporate work. We just had Opus go through it, Frank Group, so on. So it's, we're probably up to about 500 now, people.
Fantastic. Yeah. And they are the sort of the classic firms where, they're bringing people in, generally training leaders through.
Yeah. And scaling through that player coach role. Yeah. In fact, the Frank Group program was actually very senior, reporting into CEO. So that was that's more like the leadership program we're running in Prague, right. That particular one. And we ran that globally, in person, in Melbourne, New York, Barcelona, UK. It was a big one. It was great. Really nice group of people.
We're not allowed to call the Prague a retreat, are we? It's very much a leadership program. When I was chatting to you while we were just sort of getting ready for this, I said, I really like the idea of your Prague retreat. And he's like, no, it's not a retreat.
Well, we don't call it a retreat. The reason is that, people trying to tell their partner that they're going on a retreat, it's like in Prague. It doesn't sound, it doesn't quite work.
Last time I went to Prague was a stag weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a much nicer side to Prague, which I hope that when people come, they want to experience, because it is just such a beautiful city. But we, people can, we said bring your partners, and experience it together. There'll be plenty of time for people to go and see the city. We've organised some excursions.
Oh,
if people want to do some beer tasting, they can, because we're very proud of our beer here, which for someone who doesn't really drink anymore, culturally, I'm a bit of a misfit. but even a non-alcoholic beers, I mean, they have a whole, there's quite a big scene for that here, because beer is such a big part of the culture. It really is. I mean, it's
still quite part of a recruitment culture. So
definitely. Yeah.
Last thing I want to ask you,
Yep.
and I'm conscious of your time. The market. It's the thing that, we've been seeing economic news, seeing layoffs at the big tech firms, and recruitment is not as good as it was in H1, but it's not the apocalypse. Business seems to be good. Yeah, it seems, nothing's fallen off a cliff yet. What's your advice to player coaches and founders going into this market as we think it's going to be, as it starts to tighten a little?
Well, the player coach, and I'll steal this term from Seth Godin. You need to think about yourself as a linchpin. What are you doing that's adding value? Because that's going to be key, during a difficult time when people are looking for ways to save money. They're being realistic. That's it. Founders. I mean, first of all, let's take a step back. We've got this very strange paradox happening in the market at the moment, where we've got people decided that, I don't really want to work anymore. So we've got this kind of candidate shortage. Although we've seen in the last few months more baby boomers wanting to come back on the market and so on. So there is that, and where their strengths may be placed. What are we up to now? Around 250,000 jobs that have been cut from the tech market. Again, some of the media is kind of telling us that, you kind of hear about, Amazon, for example, 10,000 jobs at Amazon. It's like, yeah, but that's 3% of their, it's not even worth putting in the paper, or on the news. But there is this danger of a domino effect, people getting panicky, the way the market's going, and, for the consumer. And I think that's where it always comes back to is, and my fear is that, I think we are having a bit of a rally. Recruitment tends to do that. It also follows the economy usually. Yep. And companies need to be really mindful. I mean, I was talking about this with my group I'm sure you were as well, like February, March. I had some people in my group leave because in August we did a session on preparing for it. They didn't want to hear it. It's a bit of ostrich mentality.
Wow.
Because they're already vulnerable. And so when you go into a situation like COVID, you have to have an immune system, cash flow. And I was always nervous when there's a rally, people are like, what, I'm going to burn the ships. I'm going to rent an office with 50 people for 50 people. I've got 10 at the moment, but I'm going to fill it. And I was like, come on, this is an emotional thing. So, making sure that we're not making those kind of decisions at this stage. Thinking about what would it take to be lean, but also not make any knee-jerk reactions that we saw in COVID, where it's like, right, everyone's on, get rid of people, shut things down, and then go, oh, excuse me, would you mind coming back? Because we're going to need you now. And I worry people will do that and make too much of a knee-jerk reaction to this situation.
I talk about Delta all the time, and the thing is, you can predict a downturn. You'll always be right at some point, but
of course,
we feel it is close. And actually, I think where it's going to hit recruiters the hardest are those non-billing managers. So actually, in a lot of ways, I think those non-billing managers need to, as their teams potentially shrink, but also as the company probably needs to see that those best salespeople that you have are not demonstrating.
No, I think that's a really important point. So if you're a sales manager and you've become apathetic towards the role of sales and billing because you're like, phew, don't have to do that anymore, you are vulnerable. So I would, if you're sitting there listening to that thing and I don't want to be billing again, I would start to kind of think, no, Go and get your boots out the garage, clean them up, because you're going to have to go back and play, and I would quickly get yourself fit for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's recruitment, so it's hard work, and some of the tactics have changed, some of the tools have changed, but actually, if you can still do the job, then there's no better time to justify your value to an organization than to show everybody.
And that's what I mean by being a linchpin. You've got to be productive. I always say, how do we as a business, and I think this is a space you're in, which I can, talking to you, Charlotte and Dalton, the space of outsourcing, how do we make sure that people can go out and play and be productive and coach? If they could do those two things, coach your team, hold them accountable, practice those coaching skills, and be productive and involved in closing deals, and then everything out, and you build a system around that. That's what I would be focusing on as a business right now, is investing in those areas, so that when we do come out of this, which inevitably we will, it feels like you never will, but we will, that you come out really strong with good foundations, good systems in place. Make sure that people aren't getting burnt out, but they are being as productive as possible. I think that to me would be the focus. Focus on content, being an expert in your market, doubling down on your niche, all those things I think are going to be absolutely, that would be in my game plan for sure. It's in our game plan already, really.
Fantastic. Well, look, really good to hear you practicing what you preach as well. And I think that's the thing I've always, you talk about content, you're very present in content. You talk about the player coach, and I like the bit where you talked about how you'll bring your own team through within your business as well. So we'll probably should catch up in a few months and just see if this downturn's happened, and whether we've been taxed to death by Jeremy Hunt, which we'll find out later today.
Yeah, today, won't we?
So
that'll be interesting.
So lots and lots going on. If people want to come and check out the Player Coach course, we're going to put the links below this podcast. If people want to connect with you or get in touch with you, how do they do that, Andrew?
LinkedIn, playercoach.com. Those are the two places, really.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for catching up again. We'll definitely do it soon.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see how this. I look forward to seeing lots and lots of player coaches go through your course and start contributing to our groups. Yeah. So catch up soon, mate. Take care.
Cheers, Andy. All the best.